paper, so it may not be as effective as with oil paintings, but the inspiration will always exist in my paintings. According to me, lacquer paintings have only one limitation for expressing one's feelings. Unlike the oil paintings, in which artists can directly express their feelings immediately, lacquer paintings require time, patience, and the artists have to spend a lot of physical effort and wait for the result of their inspiration. This may stimulate the viewer's interest, but it is also a major limitation of lacquer painting, in my opinion. Therefore, the greatest challenge for an artist is to control such things. Secondly, it is the lacquer painting materials that drive an artist's feelings. For instance, an operation may make me deviate from the original intent, but it is also the factor that drives me to some new innovation. Gold and silver are expensive materials which are beaten into very thin leaves so that the artists can paste them onto their paintings. This trade is popular at the Kieu Khi village, located in the suburb of Hanoi. The villagers use hammers to beat gold and silver into thin leaves as a piece of paper and then pile them up into a standard unit. Such gold and silver leaves may be put underneath the lacquer cups to make the surface color deep and warm, or may be applied directly on the surface of the painting. When talking about lacquer paintings, one must talk about the traditional materials. So, the contemporary lacquer art must also originate from traditions. The artists of the past generations created very graceful and mythical paintings. Nowadays, the modern artists are also able to express many things, probably by carving deep, sawing off, embossing, or mixing many chemicals, etc. For me, I very much respect the traditional lacquer material. I will try to translate the traditional lacquer material into a product of art language, which is beyond the language of decoration. More than half a century ago, being encouraged by the French teachers, the graduates of the Indochina School of Fine Arts rediscovered lacquer paintings. Starting with Trần Quang Trấn, Trần Văn Khẩn, Nguyễn Khang, Nguyễn Gia Trí, etc. These folding screen paintings could be seen as a combination of the Eastern spirit and the Western plastic arts. With the open structure, flowers, plants and characters dominated a space which was half two-dimensional and half three-dimensional. The characters appeared to be arranged in single lines, and the space appeared to comprise several layers. Especially, the spirit of the paintings was close to the temple interior and eastern ornamental gardens. The realism in the early 1960s exploited the descriptive and eye-catching characteristics of lacquer paintings. After that, great artists like Nguyễn Sáng, Nguyễn Tư Nghiêm used lacquer as a means for idea expression rather than for descriptive purposes. The generality of Mr. Sáng and the figure-breaking style of Mr. Nghiêm seemed to make lacquer paintings return to the plain space. Some other artists like Đặng Tin Tưởng, Nguyễn Nghĩa Duyên used the figure engraving technique similar to engraved wood paintings on the frame and then apply color to the figures. The color that is directly applied often dissipates after about 20 years. Mr. Tưởng was careful enough to apply a lacquer coat before wiping it and applying the color to make it long-lasting. The engraving lacquer art during the traditional period was applied in the decoration of the folding screen paintings, couplets, boards inscribed with Chinese characters, and cupboard paintings. During the period of 1930 to 1936, artist Nguyễn Xuân Bái developed this kind of painting again. However, very few people nowadays like it because of its minute and descriptive nature.
Năm 2000 sắp tới này thì không biết rằng là cái nghệ thuật sơn khắc thì nó sẽ
In the year
phát triển
2000, we don't know how the art of lacquer engraving will develop.
Nếu như mà tôi đánh giá nó không
However,
chủ quan.
looking around the big national galleries,
Là chúng
if I'm not mistaken and subjective,
ở chỗ này
most of the artists are similar in their perspective,
mà
use of color, layout, use of blocks.
cái nhìn làm
For
sao
me,
cho nó hiện
I
đại.
want to create a modern painting
Hiện
in
đại.
accordance
Cái phong cách
with
thể hiện
the traditional style.
của dân tộc.
One can engrave things but can also emboss. Young artists use engraving and embossing in accordance with a different idea. They discovered the ability of the materials to self-express the natural color. The old engraving and embossing technique can be applied in a modern context with the spirit of returning to the ancestor style.
Thực ra là cái sơn đắp
In
này
fact, the artists of the past generations have applied this embossing technique, but very few people were aware of that, because when the artists used the embossing technique in making some couplets or horizontal boards inscribed with Chinese characters, people thought it was sculpture or gold gilding, while in fact it was embossing technique. For me, when I finished embossing the raw material onto the painting, it looked so beautiful that I need not do anything more. This occurs naturally from the use of the materials themselves. The composition of the materials is the same as in the past, with lacquer, soil, sawdust being mixed together.
những cái thành phần để làm nên cái đắp này thì nó cũng y như các cụ dùng hồi xưa, gồm có sơn, đất, mùn cưa trộn với nhau.
The winding path of development of Vietnamese lacquer paintings always contains the differences between the young and old generations. Nevertheless, this is a trend of bringing the traditional spirit to modern arts. Many overseas Vietnamese students have also traveled to Vietnam to study lacquer arts with the idea of returning to their homeland.
In California, all the big universities like Berkeley, UC Davis, LA, like they got together, and Santa Barbara this is the first time they have a program to go to Vietnam. So they chose like I guess 2 or 3 students. In Berkeley's case, like 7 students to come over to Vietnam to study. So it's towards credit for our university.
Although oil painting is not restricted to Europe only, and although Vietnamese artists have been able to use many other materials, and after all, materials are not something that can absolutely be typical of a nation, lacquer painting is an art which is closely associated with the development of fine art techniques, and which always contains something of old friends and of native land.